Welcome back to Learning is the New Working, brought to you by me, Chris Pirrie, and the Learning Futures Group. And to this episode, which is part of our Season 4, also known as Learning for Good. In this season, as you probably know, I'm partnering with my colleague and friend Lutz Ziob to learn from practitioners in the development sector who are building skills for people who do the good work of international humanitarian aid, development and emergency response. Today's guest is Nicolas Kroeger. He is the director of the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. And he is a really seasoned international aid professional who's lived and worked in Afghanistan, Zimbabwe, Tajikistan, Sudan, and East Timor. The Humanitarian Leadership Academy, HLA, is a global learning initiative that was set up in 2015 to facilitate the partnership and collaboration that enables people to prepare for and respond to crisis in their own countries. They've established a global network that assesses local needs and works with partners to develop tailored learning, training, and knowledge programs at the point of need. They offer a free e-learning platform called Kaya that provides training to over 100,000 humanitarian volunteers and professionals. The HLA is hosted by Save the Children and funded in part by Al-Waid Philanthropies and by a public-private partnership with Unilever. But the Academy is forming unique international networks, and it's really interesting how they combine the broad reach of digital platforms with local assets and sourcing that allow localization of materials and deep student engagement. Driven by the philosophy that local communities are the best resource to prepare and respond in terms of crisis, the Humanitarian Leadership Academy goes from strength to strength. Here's my conversation with Nicolas Kroeger. Welcome to Learning is the New Working. Thanks for your contribution to this Learning for Good series or season. And thanks for sharing your work at the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. I'm excited to learn more, so should we get started?
Sure.
Great. We start with a few quick questions to give a sense of your work practice. So can you start by telling me what part of the world you live in and you work in and why?
Sure. So I am in London in the UK, and the reason why I'm in London is that, well, I'm a humanitarian aid worker by trade. Met my wife in Sudan when I was working there, and we started building a family, but traveling in various countries that are not necessarily that secure, and facing humanitarian crisis. Maybe not the ideal place to raise a small family. So we decided to come back to London, which is actually a great place because there is a vibrant humanitarian community in London. There is also a vibrant startup community in London, and kind of joining those two sort of strands together is really fantastic. And London is a really great place to and a hub for a lot of the humanitarian work that is happening.
Now, you mentioned Sudan and you mentioned London, but I'm guessing there is a few other countries in your backstory as well.
Sure. Yes, there are a few. I actually started my career in Zimbabwe as a humanitarian attaché, but then moved on to other countries as well. So ended up working also in Central Asia, Southeast Asia as well. But I had lived in Africa for North and West Africa for quite a significant part of my life when I was a kid.
Interesting. What is your job title, Nick, and what do you actually do on a typical day? They're not always the same thing.
Right. So I'm the director of an organization called the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. And on a typical day, I guess my work relies on trying to make sure that what we're trying to achieve at the Humanitarian Leadership Academy goes as far as we can take it. So we are a relatively small initiative that was started a while back by Save the Children. We sort of gained a certain amount of autonomy, but came back into Save the Children recently, and so my day-to-day job is around navigating us in those various waters. But obviously, I've got a great team that's looking after developing our learning solutions, looking after our strategic engagements, making sure we've got the right partnerships in place to deliver those solutions, and obviously have all the supports of what Save the Children can offer in terms of obviously finance, admin, etc.
Got it. So Save the Children is like your home, your parent organization, if you like, but you have a very distinct mission. Can you share what the mission of HLA is?
Yeah. So the academy is, we call ourselves the academy in short, rather than always going through the whole title of Humanitarian Leadership Academy. So the academy is an organization that tries to help enable organizations and individuals all over the world, to be better prepared and respond to disasters as they strike.
And what services does the academy offer?
So we've got two main platforms that we're operating. One is called Kaya, and Kaya is a digital learning platform which is developed on open source technology, and on which we have aggregated and created quite a substantial amount of courses. So we've got about 450 courses currently on it. We've got about 115,000 learners on that platform, and from 190 countries, and with the largest numbers of users located in countries where actually disasters happen or have happened, or at least that are currently affected by humanitarian crisis. So that's one of our platforms that we have. The other one is called HPass, and sort of comes from the terminology-wise, came from the Humanitarian Passport, and it's an online platform which is dedicated to humanitarian professional development, and through which users and individuals can get digital badges that will recognize humanitarian skills and experience, and providing then that evidence to organizations that may want to recruit them about those skills and experience that they would have had, and also enables organizations to create badges and issue badges to those individuals. So that's sort of the HPass. We have also developed, as part of HPass, quality standards for humanitarian learning and assessment, and you can get some of those services as you join HPass.
Well, that's interesting.
So these are the two. So these are the two sort of platforms that we have and that we operate. In addition to that, we have a few organizational solutions that we can provide more as a sort of consultancy type, but depending on where it is and how it is, we might deliver, if we do get funding. Otherwise, we might deliver some of those ourselves. So one of the kind of main one that we have is actually based on our Kaya portal, and this is what we call an organizational portal. So organizations, international organizations, but also local organizations can develop a portal and have a branded portal on Kaya, which enables creation, curation, and sharing of learning opportunities for that particular organization. Having said that, those portals can be either internal, as part of a sort of internal HR sort of drive, to ensure that staff have the right, have access to the right content, courses, to do whatever job they're doing. And we have organizations such as the International Rescue Committee or the Norwegian Refugee Council that have branded portals such as that, where they have courses that they have developed themselves and all the staff inductions, etc. But also they are then also putting in there some of the courses that we have on Kaya and that they feel would be of relevance for their staff.
I got it. So you can kind of white label your platform, and that might come with content, and then people can add additional content, and that's typically for humanitarian agency type organizations, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Although it doesn't necessarily need to be just for humanitarian organizations, and the courses that we actually have are pretty wide ranging. So they are not necessarily purely around humanitarian assistance per se, and can actually dive into more international development as well. So the nexus between international development and humanitarian is getting a bit stronger, and the courses that we have could apply probably to both areas of the work that is happening worldwide in terms of development. And so, yeah, so you would be able to actually find courses for both, but as the name implies, that we are obviously, it's mostly humanitarian organizations for the moment that have access to that.
Can you just, for our listeners here who may, I mean, by design, many of them may be new to the sort of domain in this area. That's why we're doing the inquiry. Can you describe those two domains? So you talked about international development and humanitarian work. They're not necessarily the same thing, but perhaps they're coming closer together. Can you give us a quick description of what those kind of works are, and maybe an example of an organization that's doing those two different types of work?
Absolutely. And the distinction is important, but at the same time, it is important to understand that there are quite clear linkages between the two. So humanitarian assistance is essentially the work that you're doing as you are preparing or you're responding to a disaster that may happen or may have happened. So, for example, recently there was the storm hitting the Bahamas. So all the efforts that are currently ongoing to support the people in the Bahamas is everything that would relate to humanitarian assistance. In advance of that, there would have been some work done by the authorities or communities, etc., in the Bahamas as well to prepare for, the storm coming in, etc. So all of that, the in advance work and as we respond work or after the disaster work would be termed as the humanitarian assistance. Now, international development or development is the kind of more longer term solution to a problem that may be linked, that may have some other sources than purely than simply a disaster. So that could be, for example, where you're looking at reducing poverty in a particular place, in a particular country, and this is obviously looking at the longer term and where the tools that you're using will be much more, which will require much more input from a lot of different actors in that particular country, starting with very obviously the government putting in place a policy for policy reduction, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of your more longer term, 2, 3, 4, 5, even 10 or 20 years plan that a country is putting forward. Now, in terms of that nexus and the links between the two, so when you're looking at disasters that are happening somewhere, obviously those disasters might be actually compounded by the fact that people may be particularly poor in a particular area, and that would impact them more than they would otherwise be. And in which case, you would want to obviously respond to the immediate needs of those populations, but also start thinking about, okay, well, let's start putting in place the systems that will enable us to take those people out of not only, take them, support them with their immediate needs, but also take them out of their poverty, of the poverty trap that they are currently in.
Got it.
So it's really important that as you actually respond to humanitarian disasters, start thinking as well, okay, what does that mean though in practice, in 2 years' time, how do I start putting in place systems that would enable that to happen?
And so an organization, so one can easily imagine the International Red Cross, for example, in many instances is first on the scene when humanitarian assistance is needed in a sort of disaster context. I think most people would associate that Red Cross brand with that kind of humanitarian assistance. but they also are involved in development work as well in some countries, right?
Yes. So there would be the